Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about the biggest myths about Africa debunked. My name is Farida. Thanks for joining me. Many people have the wrong idea about what it is like to live in Africa. Now, I really hope that gone are the days when people think that people in Africa still are living in huts and tents or with the wild animals. I hope gone are those days, but there could still be some people on this planet who are not informed. But I'm here to share with you the real truth about what it is like to live in Africa by breaking down the biggest myths about living in Africa. Let's get into the video. Number one thing I want to share is that just like any other country, there are different lifestyles that exist across the different countries in Africa. Now, we all know that Africa is composed of different countries. Instead of it being one continent with different states, it's one continent with different countries. Hope that makes sense. Especially for those living in the United States, I know it can be a little bit tricky because the US is a continent made with different states. Anyways, now let's get into what it is that people think. Most people think that Africa is nothing but poverty. Africa is nothing but a lot of poor people who have nothing basically in their life. Now, I want to tell you that yes, there's poverty, but yes, there's wealth as well. And the amount of wealth that is in Africa, besides its natural resources and minerals is insane. There are some wealthy people that you can never imagine even exist anywhere on this planet that live in Africa and exist in Africa and got their money from Africa. Now, retracting a little bit is to say that yes, there are some poor people in Africa. There are also some really wealthy people in Africa, and there's also the middle class in Africa. Just like any other country, you can't expect everyone to be rich. That's the same way you cannot expect everyone to be poor. It just doesn't work like that. Even if you want it to, it's not going to be able to work like that. Sorry. So it's to say that, I'm going to give you the example of the United States because I used to live in the United States. You're going to find some homeless people on the streets of the United States. As shocking as it might sound for some people who think that everyone who live in the US is rich and everyone must have a good life. No, circumstances happen and some people find themselves homeless. And it's the same thing in Africa where you might find some people who are begging on the streets, who need help, and you will find people who have cars, homes, houses, planes, the biggest things that you couldn't imagine people owning in Africa, them owning, and a lot more overseas as well. And yet, we still have people in other countries or who are not as educated thinking that, oh, Africa is just composed of what we see in like the early days of TV of people paying people off to appear poor or even poorer than they actually are. I'm pretty sure if you go back to listening to some interviews that are like that have like the different language going over the video and you can hear someone speaking their native language, if there are people who could translate those native languages, I'm pretty sure that you could find that what the reporters are saying and what the person is saying in their native language is not the same because it's not as bad as people make it seem. There are some cities and villages in Africa. It's the same thing everywhere you go in this world, except that the level of development is different. For instance, African countries are developing countries in most cases. And so when you see a city, it's going to be drastically different than when you see a village because of the different levels of development that are still ongoing. Now, when you go to a developed country, a developed nation, you would still have some villages, but it wouldn't seem as drastic of a difference as it might seem if you were in Africa. For instance, you could go to a village in New York and not even know that it was a village because of the high buildings, because of the nice buildings that are there. But you would notice if you are in Africa, specifically in Niger or other Western countries that are under development, because when you go into the cities, you'll see high-rise buildings and really beautiful buildings. But when you go into the villages, you might still see some really like nice buildings, but not at the level of the city buildings. And that's because it's a country that's still under development, meaning that the cities are going to be more developed at first, and then the villages will follow up, but we're just not there yet. It doesn't make it as bad as people seem when they come to African countries and only go to villages for like filming purposes and reporting purposes, and stay in the cities when it's like for enjoying life and the luxury that exists in Africa. It's just not the same. And what I mean by that is, okay, so sometimes when you go in for like services in the US, when you're in a city, like a state with like a village that's like not the city of that state, you would notice that not all services are available. For instance, where I used to live, we had access to, and this is like basic examples, like because it's a service that I use, but we have access to like the Apple Apple store. There are people who would have to drive 1 hour from where they are in the same state, or 2 hours from where they are in the same state, to the Apple store that's in the city of that state. So it makes sense because those people are kind of like in those villages of that state. But the villages are developed in terms of buildings, in terms of other services, but they don't have everything in their city. In their city, because it's not the city of that state. It's a village in that state. And one example that I love the most is there's this village in the city that I used to live in, and they really like they kept everything almost the same. I mean, their buildings are nice, everything's nice, but they kind of have a vibe to it. Like when you enter the village, you know it's a village. They still have a little plate in the like towards the entrance to the village where they say like the village name, and you go in, like you drive through it like you're in the same state. You drive through it without even knowing you're driving through that little village in your own state. But it does exist, and people need to start normalizing the fact that yes, it's just that in African countries or developing countries, they haven't developed high, or like they haven't developed completely enough to reach to a place where the cities look the same as the villages and they all kind of merge together. This is what I see with that. For instance, when you have cases where you are in the United States, there's barely, especially in those bigger states, there are barely any plots of land that are not inhabited or that are not like reserved for like wildlife, but there aren't a lot of vast land in like the cities and stuff like that. And so when you think about it, in Africa, there's still a lot of land, and people haven't occupied all those land spots yet. And so the point I'm trying to make is that in the United States, there's a lot of people, and so a lot of these places had been built. You know, they're even looking to, if they could, they would expand to have more places to build on. But when you think about it, in Africa, there's still a lot of space that hasn't been built on yet. And so having the cities, there's just like, yes, the cities are inhabited more, and people have plots of land they haven't built on or they're not using actively. And so you could see a shift when you like drive through a city and go into a village, because of all this vast majority of land that isn't being used actively year round. And so because of that, it's not going to be looked like it's developed as other countries are, because people haven't gotten to where they need to use those plots of land yet. And so those places are still empty. And because of that emptiness, you kind of feel the shift when you're driving through different spaces. Whereas in developed countries, you don't feel the shift even when you drive through a village, because there's so many people, there are so many activities that, you know, you tend to miss what's going on around you sometimes. Not to say that there aren't so many activities in Africa as well. It's just not at the bigger scale as other developed countries already had made it. So every country has its perks, every country has what it's known for. And for African countries, I feel like business is something that is booming in African countries. And it's just my perspective. I'm not a business major, I'm more so a public health major. But I feel that small businesses are booming over in Africa everywhere. Everyone's doing their little business. Small businesses are really booming in Africa, and there are a lot of business opportunities. Why? Because it's a developing country. There aren't a lot of these bigger powers. I mean, I'm not globing all African countries in one. When I'm saying you know, it's a developing country, I'm talking about the one country that I'm living in. But Africa as a continent, the countries, especially the ones closer to each other, are really similar in how they are and how they are ran. Anyways, when you think about it, because of the country, eh, of that particular country, like specifically in Niger being a developing country, there's a lot of opportunity for you to come in and invest and make something work. Whereas in the United States, for example, it's a developed nation where a lot of big corporations already exist. A lot of big businesses already have their doors open, and it's so hard to make a name out there for yourself because there are a lot of people who are already doing great and awesome and expanding, and they have the money to make it expand a lot faster than you do. Whereas in Africa, it's a developing nation. Yes, there are rich people here. Yes, there are people who are really, really well off compared to even the richest people in the United States. But because of the way that they live and what they have accessible to them. But what I'm saying is that because of that, the country is fresh, it's new, it's being developed, it's growing, and you have more opportunities because it's growing, because things are not set in stone. People are not accustomed to just one supplier or one kind of business. You can invent, you can renovate, you can innovate, you can really make it work and mold it into how you want it to be, because it's something that's growing and hasn't been set in stone yet. For me, I would think that Africa is the new world. It used to be the old world because, life starting here in Africa and stuff like that. But I feel that Africa is the new world because all of the other different nations have developed into where they're kind of like stagnant or constant. They're not really moving or making big, big, big strides. Whereas in Africa, it's not the big corporations or the big companies that are making big strides. It's the people who are. It's small ones that are coming up and making big, big, big strides. So it's a land of opportunity. It's a land where you can really make it if you try, because everything's fresh and everyone's like trying to reinvent themselves and create something really interesting. Now, the school system, especially in Niger, compared to other countries, are different. I would give it that. There's a lot of inclination towards private school than public school, whereas in other countries, public schools do have more people wanting to go to public schools than private schools, and it's more normalized to go to private public school than private school. However, there's a good amount of private school and public school for whatever floats your boat and your family's decisions. But I think schools, people have access to schools as everyone else does all over the world. I'm not saying everything's perfect. I'm not here to sell you a dream that, oh my gosh, everything's good in Africa, just like they are. Things are good in other countries, things are developed, and there's nothing that needs improvement. No, I'm just saying that the perception that people have overseas, people who don't live in Africa, have the perception that they have over Africa is sometimes wrong. It's highly skewed, it's overly skewed to have a viewpoint of the people of Africa and Africa itself. Whereas really there are things that need improvement. There are things that, like I said, it's different countries that are under development, meaning that they're still developing, they're still growing, but there's still opportunity here. There's still life here. There's still good opportunities to be had here, and there's still really things that need to be improved. I would say there's a handful of things that could be improved, and that's another video for another day. But I'm just here to share with you that, it's not only the myths, it's not the perception that sometimes, and most of the time, is being portrayed on TV. For instance, a lot of times we hear about security and safety on TV in different African countries, even about Niger, where it's like classified as a red color country or like an orange country, and you have like travel advisory or travel bans on those countries just because they're perceived to be bad. But when you think about it, these are countries where, you know, people are living their life normal. People don't know about these like red, their country being flagged as red. Like the common person doesn't even know about that. They don't even care about that. Like it's out of this world to think about that for them. Why? Because for them, like things are so normal. There's nothing horrible going on that would make them even think that their country is listed as red for other countries not to, other citizens to think twice before traveling to their country. It's absurd, especially in the case of Niger when you think about it, especially of the different events that had happened in Niger a couple of years now. You would say, oh my gosh, this is a country we can't go to. It's not safe. There's a lot of things going on. It seems like it's even like, civil war, stuff like that. They portray it so bad. But when you live in the country, you're like, what's that all about? Like, there's nothing going on. Everyone's fine. Everyone's living normal. So that's kind of weird. That's like a phenomenon where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just how they want you guys to perceive the country. It's just how they want you to see the country. Sometimes it's really political. Sometimes I feel like it's just because the other country has, something against this country, or laws that didn't get passed the way they want it to be passed, or benefits that they didn't get from that other country based on like trades that they made, and now all of a sudden that country becomes evil, they become bad, and the people from that country become bad. And if you're going to be listening to the internet every time, even though I'm talking to you on the internet, I know I am, but if you're going to be listening to the internet all the time without investigating or looking into what you're listening to, you're going to be misled, because that's not how real people are living. That's not the daily life of people. It's like, it's just like in any other country. Safety depends on where you are. Safety depends on how you live. Safety really depends on a lot of different factors. You could be living in the US, have serious safety issues, live in a country in Africa, excuse me, live in a different country in Africa and have great safety. It really just depends on where you are. The one thing that really is interesting, though, that I think, is worth sharing is the fact that when you come from the United States, though, people think that you have a lot of money because the United States portray itself as a rich country, and that everyone in that country is rich. And so people think, oh my gosh, you're rich. And so you have to understand the way that you carry yourself around when when you're around others that don't understand the concept that everywhere in the country there are poor people, and there are, middle class people, and there are really rich people, just like any other country in the world. But one thing is security and safety in Niger. I think even if you have a safety issue, even if it is a security issue, it's not a huge issue where you're thinking, oh my gosh, people are coming at me with guns, or people are, coming at me with like machine guns and stuff like that. No, it's not. It's not a country where people have access to those easily, or people are carrying easily. No, it's a country where there's a lot of petty thefts, but not really big crimes. I hope that makes sense. People here are not committing crimes where they're shooting each other. No, they're committing crimes where they're stealing phones, or stealing bikes, or stealing generators, or stealing water hose, or stealing small things that, yes, even in other countries get stolen, or maybe in other countries are not getting stolen, but bigger things are. But in Africa, I think the safety and security aspect of it is really people doing petty thefts, and that's sometimes, I would say, in my opinion, it's related to people not having a lot of activities to do, or maybe like you just are hanging with the wrong crowd, or you just got caught up in things. But there are some little petty thefts that happen here and there in Africa, especially when you are not native. But when you're native to the country, or you like people know that you live there now, like they're not going to be bothering you. They're not going to be bothering you. Most of the time, it's people who they know are not living there or just maybe visiting, and they think, oh, it's an opportunity for us to see what we can grab. I would say that the one thing that I think is interesting is that it's not big crimes. It's not really, really big crimes like, you know, unaliving people or stuff like that. It's petty thefts like stealing phones or grabbing phones from the road. People really don't leave a space for women in Africa in their thoughts. It's almost like they only see the man here in Africa, whereas women have big roles that they play in business, politics, and the development of their own country. Now, sorry, if I do this, you're going to see the art behind me, and it kind of like uncenters the video. Anyways, let's get back into the video. So people really kind of forget about women, and women play a crucial role. Women, especially in Africa, I feel are doing more businesses. They're trying more, and they're getting more into the business space um, compared to before. Women are really like doing innovative things compared to what they used to. I was smelling like matches being lit, and I have my both my windows open. Maybe you can see them in the background, and so I can smell matches being opened, and I know that there's something being made in the kitchen, and I got kind of worried. Anyways, let's get back into the video. Everything's cool, everything's good, people are safe. Women are doing smaller businesses to kind of help their families or help themselves become more independent, but women are not just sitting on the sidelines and letting other people do the work for them. They're really working hard to reinvent themselves here in Niger, and other countries across Africa as well. You will find women who are getting higher education. It's not just about, oh, girls being married underage. And something about those underage marriages, yes, they're happening, but in some cases, it's people who are choosing to get married at a younger age. I'm not saying underage girls getting married or choosing to be put into marriages. I acknowledge that, yes, there's underage marriage happening, but I'm just talking about the different circumstances of also younger generations and younger people choosing to actually get married earlier, and they're of age, most of the time 18, 19. But yeah, there are some cases that people choose to get married, but it doesn't really stop their life. There's still people going to school. I feel like it's just normal, but it's not normal for everyone. So it's really worth saying or explaining, because some people don't understand that, yes, this is also happening in Africa. This is also normal for Africa. Cultural expectations versus actual reality. I think that the culture of Africa, of a sense of community, is something that is real. It's something that, it takes a village to raise a child. Those kind of things still exist in Africa, and I think it's awesome. There are different aspects of cultures that, makes it worth living in Africa, and it makes it, even with the development of Africa, it makes it different compared to other countries. I think that for the most part, the reason why different African countries get bad publicity is because there are other countries who have used that bad publicity to brainwash other people, or to change the way other people perceive different things in life in order to make themselves better. And so I appreciate the fact that we're moving away from that era and entering a new era where people get to have direct access to knowledge and information all around the world. And they get to discover that, yes, people are not living on trees. And it hasn't been long ago that I was in school. I think I was in middle school when I was asked, do you guys live on trees in Africa? Now, whether that be from, just pure bully energy, or it be a genuine concern, I think that gone are those days. And I'm so glad that people are choosing to educate themselves instead of just sitting on their couches and being fed information. Now, in the comments, let me know what myths you have heard about Africa or about Niger in general, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.